Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Tomorrow, over 150 MPs from different parties are putting their name to a letter to the new Home Secretary, Sajid Javid. They want him to put his personal weight behind a Home Office review of anti-abortion campaigns in close proximity to abortion clinics. One council has delineated an exclusion zone outside a clinic. Is that what should happen elsewhere? Well, women visiting many clinics at the moment are confronted by a mix of pickets, placards and prayers. Many of them consider it harassment. But for those against abortion, this is about free speech and for offering alternatives to abortion to women. Well, in the US, abortion is on the front line of a culture war between liberals and religious conservatives, an issue argued as bitterly there as Brexit is here. But as we now live in an era of globalisation of protest, is the US fight over abortion coming here? Helen Thomas has been looking at both sides of the debate. Her report does contain images of some graphic anti-abortion campaign material.
It is our own decision affecting her own life. Abortion is not the dangerous operation that it used to be.
50 years since abortion became legal.
Children carrying white flowers. It was described as the greatest moral issue of them all.
50 years of protests.
The anti-abortion lobbyists tried to block the driveway with their bodies.
Controversy that goes right to the doors of hospitals and medical centres.
This is an explicit strategy. It makes the fact that women are seeking an abortion a public spectacle.
We don't approach people, and instead we stand outside the hospital and we pray, holding signs for an end to abortion.
We've had a client who, to avoid having to walk past them, has climbed over our wall and turned up here with bruised and grazed knees.
And still, it continues.
Ownership over our own body. Who are you two men to talk about women's right over their own body?
Ealing Council has banned anti-abortion protesters from demonstrating outside a clinic which provides terminations. The council's cabinet...
Ealing, 2018. The first place to put a so-called buffer zone around a UK abortion clinic. It's a move the anti-abortion group here says restricts freedom of expression and their work supporting women. The debate is going on nationwide. I'm looking at a database from the British Pregnancy Advisory Service, or BPAS. This is the material sent to the Home Office as part of the review into whether buffer zones are needed around abortion clinics. There's nearly 1,600 accounts from clients, friends and relatives, passers-by and local residents. And it's from clinics across the country, from Glasgow to Portsmouth, from Cardiff to Norwich. Some date back to the 1980s and 90s, but the vast majority come after about 2013, when certain groups, some linked to the US, started to become more active, and when BPAS started collecting contemporaneous accounts.
Telling me to keep it, praying for me, touched me, trying to get my attention, was very patronising and I felt judged.
I didn't want to leave the clinic when I actually got in. I had to run to my taxi when leaving. It was a feeling of dread walking out of the clinic doors to face them.
We're outside the QMC, the Queen's Medical Centre.
John is part of 40 Days for Life, an organisation started in Texas and active in the UK for 8 years.
We want to be within sight of the place where abortions are carried out.
For 40 days in Lent, John's group stood outside Nottingham's main hospital for 12 hours a day. Nottingham City Council brought an injunction against him. It was overturned by a judge who said it could simply not be justified.
That seems to me to be a fairly important aspect of a healthy democratic society, the ability to discuss with people important issues, even if they are contentious. It's not about persuading people, forcing people. It's about praying for people. And I believe, as a Christian, that God can intervene and will intervene in people's lives if we ask him to.
Why would prayer not work 100 metres down the road or in church or at home? Why is it important to you that you have to be praying there?
We do pray 100 metres down the road and in church. We pray elsewhere. What we're doing in 40 days is we're also adding to that an offer of practical help and support and witness, really. I know a lot of the people who are involved in leading these groups, and they're just not the sort of people who intimidate. You know, the kind of people that you get praying in the rain and in the cold outside a clinic or a hospital, they're not violent and aggressive people. You know, they're people who say the rosary.
Be Here For Me is a campaign against buffer zones. These accounts from women helped outside clinics are taken from 14 on their website.
I think I just needed someone to talk to, first of all. And then second of all, I was in real need of financial help. They gave me the money in my account.
Without the support offered outside the abortion clinic, I would have had only one choice. My baby girl would not be here today if I hadn't met the woman outside.
Certainly there are many women who, from what we know, are being coerced into having an abortion. By family.
Coerced by whom, sorry?
By family, by friends, by boyfriends.
Do you accept that the majority of women who are attending clinics are there under their own free will?
Yeah, I don't think I could challenge that. The question is whether, when they've made that decision, they have made that decision in the light of all the evidence. Do they know, for example, that abortion involves killing an unborn child? And what we do is we stand and hold signs.
I think one of your posts you talked about plastic fetuses. I know some groups use those as a sort of demonstration.
I have been known to carry a model of a 10-week-old fetus in my pocket, because if in a conversation you come across that old chestnut, it's a clump of cells. It's relevant to say that's what it looks like at 10 weeks.
Independent sources told Newsnight the Nottingham vigils were unintrusive, but the accounts about 40 Days for Life and other groups are different elsewhere.
They were stood on both sides of the road, one with a large A3-sized picture of Jesus. One followed us over to where we stood, even though we purposefully walked to avoid them.
It's not one unified movement, and different groups operate in different ways. But a lot of the inspiration does come from the US. So there's lots of kind of ideas and suggestions and of what to do outside clinic.
Not all the anti-abortion groups outside clinics have links to the US. The Good Counsel Network, which was involved in the protests in Ealing, took its inspiration from an organisation in Ireland. Then there's the Helpers of God's Precious Infants, who organise vigils nationwide. They were an existing UK group in the 1990s, but changed their name after a visit from the US priest who founded Helpers. One controversial group with US ties is Abort 67. They use graphic images of, they say, aborted fetuses to educate the public about abortion.
I'm sorry?
What part of the woman's body is that? Can you tell me?
It's in their womb.
This is their founder, Andrew Stevenson, at a recent demonstration. The group compares society's acceptance of abortion to historic attitudes towards the slave trade.
Hundreds of years with human beings being dehumanised, compared to animals so other people could exploit them.
Abort 67 is a project of the Centre for Bioethical Reform UK, which has an affiliation with an American group of the same name. 7 years ago, the Centre for Bioethical Reform UK reported income of about £5,000, according to their accounts at Companies House. In the year to April 2017, the latest available, they reported over £100,000. The group told Newsnight its funding comes from individual donations. It said,
"If they didn't believe we were able to make a difference, I'm sure they wouldn't be giving. In the next few months, we'll be shining some light on MPs, celebrities and media organisations who are assisting the abortion lobby. They are complicit in this injustice in which babies are killed and mothers harmed."
The Good Counsel Network says it's aware of 1,000 women who've changed their minds thanks to prayer vigils in the last 5 years. BPAS says roughly 1 in 5 women coming for a consultation doesn't have an abortion with them. And that doesn't really vary between clinics with protests and those without.
The kind of re-emergence of the anti-abortion movement is because they're losing the public support. We're now over 60% of people believe that it should always just be women's choice to have an abortion, and only over 90% of the public, and again across all social categories really, believe that abortion should be available in at least some circumstances.
The BPAS clinic in Bournemouth has had an anti-abortion presence near its entrance for decades, mainly church groups. They didn't tend to approach people. But in 2016, Sarah was confronted by a man who tried to record what she said.
One of the men dressed as a monk ran over to me, got very, very close into my face and started asking me questions about whether I was aware that termination is murder. Every time I tried to sort of move away from him, he just moved with me. I walked very quickly to my car. I then felt something very close to me and I turned round and it was him. He'd ran after me. And by this point, I did scream. I was absolutely petrified.
The clinic doesn't believe that man was associated with 40 Days for Life. The manager has worked here for 14 years. She says the clinic has had more people more frequently outside since the group started its vigils last year.
Far more intimidating, far more aggressive. They stand across the entrance, there's more of them with placards, and they will actually approach and engage and touch clients and staff. It's gone too far because they are literally on our doorstep and clients have to try and manoeuvre past them to get into the building. And it's very hard for our staff because we can't do anything about it.
We put some of the stories from Bournemouth to the man who oversees the 40 Days for Life vigils in the UK.
We have a statement of peace that very clearly says that you must behave peacefully, you must behave prayerfully, and you must behave legally, and anything you do outside of that immediately disassociates yourself from the campaign. I haven't seen any single individual in 8 years overstep those marks. We're simply there offering a leaflet and offering prayers. Now, some people might feel bad about that, I understand, but to say what we're doing constitutes harassment, I would reject that. If somebody feels harassed, it is not the same as actually being harassed.
Last weekend's March for Life, an estimated 4,000 people, say the organisers, many of whom believe they see a truth that most of the country is blind to. The debate over buffer zones raises questions of definition. What constitutes harassment or intimidation?
Shame on you!
And it raises questions of rights to free expression, to privacy, to seek legal medical treatment without aggravation.
Helen Thomas reporting there, and Helen's with me now. And Helen, a letter tomorrow going to Sajid Javid. I think names were being added last time.
They were. So this is a letter written by Rupa Huq, the Labour MP for Ealing, and she wrote to Amber Rudd last year, which helped prompt this review into activity around abortion clinics. That letter had 112 other signatories. This one, I'm told, could be reaching 160. You know, they include Jeremy Corbyn, Vince Cable, Zach Goldsmith. In terms of new names to this latest letter, you have Ken Clarke, Yvette Cooper, John Whittingdale and Sarah Wollaston, who obviously is the chair of the Health Select Committee. So quite a broad church. What I've been told is that there was a sense that this issue was moving forward quite quickly under Amber Rudd. She had talked about it being unacceptable that people felt harassed or intimidated, and she talked about creating new powers. But there's a feeling that Sajid Javid is more of an unknown quantity.
Right. I mean, Ealing has done it, so clearly local government has some power to take measures if they want to.
There are several councils looking at doing the same thing as Ealing, which basically uses antisocial behaviour powers. In Bournemouth, where we filmed, the council there has visited that clinic to talk about a buffer zone. No word on a formal consultation or anything there yet. Worth noting, though, that in other parts of the world, the US, Canada, Australia, these types of buffer zones or no protest zones are very often challenged in the courts, often on free speech grounds and sometimes successfully. And indeed, in Ealing, we've already heard about a potential legal challenge.
Helen, thank you very much.